A costume party? Did you have to? Polly adjusted her black mask to make sure it properly covered her face. She stood next to her brother Brendan in the pub of the Diamond Bay Hotel. The bar in the hotel was the perfect place for a party. A cozy room opening onto a wide balcony with white wicker chairs, battered leather lounges, and the smell of sea spray. The sun had recently set, and the moon was rising large and bright over the bay and the Pacific Ocean. "It's my birthday," he said, "and my favorite sister is home. Your only sister. You're here. No point complaining now." Costume parties were not Polly's thing. People tended to act up when they were dressed as someone else, and in her experience, that was not necessarily a good thing. Add a generous deposit on an open bar, and it was a recipe for regret. Costume parties might, for instance, make someone do something silly like flirt with their brother's best friend, while in character completely misread the situation and then find themselves brutally rejected. Despite her reservations, Polly had come. She could hardly miss her brother's birthday because she had a conscientious objection to dressing up. She'd flown halfway around the world for this party, and her grandparents' 75th wedding anniversary in 2 weeks' time. Polly was dressed as Catwoman mostly because it was easy. Black leather pants, black bodysuit, both of which she already owned. Add a black mask and ears, and it was the easiest costume to pack. There was a man standing a few meters away, apart from the rest of the crowd. Like Polly, he was dressed head to toe in black. Also like her, his face was covered with a black mask. He looked like he didn't want to be here either. Polly took a generous sip of her wine. "Who are you hiding from anyway?" Brendan asked. "No one. Catwoman wears a mask." Brendan snorted. He was dressed as a troll, while his wife Sarah, across the room, was dressed as an elf. Neither of them had outgrown their fantasy, role-playing youth. Brendan smiled at Sarah like she was the only woman in the room. Diamond Bay produced loved-up couples the way other nearby towns produce bananas. Or milk. Brendan and Sarah. Polly's parents. Polly's grandparents, who were about to clock up 75 years of marriage. The happy couples of Diamond Bay were just a bit too much for Polly to take. It was much easier to be single in New York than it was in this sleepy town on New South Wales's north coast. Not everyone got happy endings. "Take your mask off then." "Nope. Life's too short to get stuck talking to boring people at parties." That may have been true, but there was someone who might be coming tonight she really didn't want to talk to. Polly loved her brother, but she preferred to avoid his best friend, her childhood tormentor, Archie Thompson. It was Archie who had pushed her into the pool, fully clothed, the summer she had started going through puberty. It was Archie who had ganged up with Brendan to beat her every time at board games. And worst of all, it had been Archie who had flirted with her at Brendan's 21st birthday party and tricked her into thinking he actually wanted to kiss her. Archie was now a stockbroker and had been living in London for the past few years. Polly had heard he was expected back for the anniversary party, though she wasn't sure if he'd arrive in time for tonight. Either way, her life would be much simpler if she didn't have to talk to him. "He's not here yet, you know," Brendan said. "I don't know what you mean," Polly replied, but inside, every single one of her muscles stood to attention. "And he's coming as a zombie." Polly shrugged like that piece of information was irrelevant, but a wave of relief rushed through her. A zombie. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed, bloodied zombie. At least she'd be able to spot him. Still, she wasn't about to take off her mask. Brendan drifted away to speak to other guests, leaving Polly standing alone, playing with the stem of her wine glass. The room was full of Brendan's workmates, some people Polly may or may not have known from school. Many people looked familiar, yet after close to 20 years away from Diamond Bay, she couldn't be sure. On her left, The man in black was still there, still on his own. He turned his head slightly, and Polly saw that in addition to the black mask across his eyes, a black scarf was tied around his head. Noticing her watching him, he bowed extravagantly, like a musketeer. With that motion, she noticed the sword, thin and shiny and attached to his slim hips. She chuckled and moved towards him. "I know who you are. You're the dread pirate Roberts. Admit it," she said. He bowed again, with pride. A grin rose slowly over his lips. They were nice lips. Full pink. Something in her stomach twisted, and all she could think was, "I'd like to kiss those lips." "Impressive," he said. "Who doesn't know The Princess Bride off by heart?" He grinned again, and Polly's chest warmed. The Princess Bride was her favorite movie growing up. It probably still was. The man in black looked her costume up and down, heat sparking in his gaze, prickling her skin in its wake. If he was a fan of The Princess Bride, Polly could spare him a few more moments of her time. "How do you know Brendan?" she asked. "I kidnapped him. I hijacked his ship, and it went from there." "Right. Why didn't you just make him walk the plank? I thought he might be useful." "So you're not going to tell me who you are?" "It's for the best, trust me. This way I won't have to dispose of you when this party is over." "How chivalrous. We pirates have a code of honor to uphold. Besides, I could ask the same of you. Who are you really?" "Catwoman." "Yes, of course, sorry. Are you hiding from someone?" "My mortal enemy," he laughed. "You have a mortal enemy." "You're a pirate. You must have many mortal enemies." He nodded. "True. How did this person become your mortal enemy?" She let out a deep sigh. Where to begin? "He once pushed me into a swimming pool fully clothed." "A capital crime." "Yes, and he cheated constantly at board games." She stopped. She didn't want to tell him the other things. Like the time Danny Mars asked her out, but not long after she saw Archie speaking to him one afternoon. Danny canceled their date and never spoke to her again. Sure, she had no proof that there was any connection between the two events, and sure, Danny had turned out to be a first-class jerk. But still, Archie Thompson was a piece of work, even without counting what had happened at Brendan's 21st. How for a few moments she'd let herself believe that Archie was more than the silly pranks. "He sounds awful. When we find him, what are we going to do to him? You could challenge him to a duel. I hear you're the best swordsman in the world." The man nodded. "Where can we find this villain?" "He's dressing up as a zombie." They looked around the room, and there was more than one person wearing ripped and bloodied clothing and face paint. But none of them were as tall as Archie, or as blonde. "Some of these people did not put in any effort at all," the pirate said. "Agreed. I came halfway around the world, and I still manage this." "Really? Where do you live?" "New York. That's a long way from Diamond Bay." Yes, she thought, and sometimes not far enough. He asked her about her life in New York, her work as a chef in several high-end restaurants, her friends. Brendan caught her eye. His eyebrows rose and wiggled a little. If only he could signal her the name of the hottie she was talking to. "You don't know if he's a hottie. You can't see his face." It didn't matter. She could hear his voice deep resonant in her gut. She could smell his body, feel him next to her, warm and strong. She could see his eyes, blue, curious, and intelligent. She knew everything about his appearance she needed to know. And besides, he was easy to talk to. And fun. He got her another drink, and they talked more about all sorts of things, movies, music books, and podcasts. And then she got the next round of drinks, and she forgot that there was a chance that Archie Thompson might be there tonight dressed as a zombie. The crowd got thicker, and the music got louder. The man looked down and noticed Polly's feet tapping. He bowed again and offered her his hand. Feeling like she was finally on holiday, feeling her stress of the last few months slip away, and not being able to remember the last time she danced, she took his hand. He pulled her into the heaving crowd. The first few dances were fast. They were surrounded by other revelers bouncing up and down. Then the music slowed, and he held out his hand again. She took it wordlessly, and he pulled her into his arms. His embrace was as strong as she imagined, and it was impossible not to let her body fall into his and be caught. After a while, he asked, "Are you single?" Perpetually, she almost said, but instead replied, "I'm in between boyfriends." She felt him chuckle, and then after a few more beats, she asked, "Are you single?" "I'm between girlfriends." So they'd established their relationship statuses. But when would he take off his mask? "I'd like to kiss you," he said. The words connected with her solar plexus. She'd never been asked outright like that before. First kisses were always a cautious dance with both individuals inching gradually closer to one another. "Do you always ask first?" "Pirate code of honor." He shrugged. "And I haven't even seen your face." She wanted to say, "No, it doesn't matter. Kiss me first. I want to kiss you before we see one another." But before she could speak, he pushed back his mask, and her blood froze. He was gorgeous, she'd been right about that. But she'd been wrong about everything else. "Archie Thompson, you rat." Polly pushed him away with not insignificant force, turned, and ran off the dance floor. He lost sight of her when she slipped into the main room of the pub. He followed in her wake through the crowded bar and out into the dark night, hoping she wasn't about to walk home by herself. Or drive. He found her sitting on a low sandstone wall overlooking the park above the bay. She was facing away from the pub, but he'd recognize her straight back and defiant shoulders anywhere. He'd seen enough of them over the years. When he sat down next to her, she groaned. "You're meant to be a zombie." "I changed my mind." "Why? How was that relevant?" He was hardly about to tell her that when he'd walked into the costume shop looking for face paint. He'd spied the black mask and scarf and remembered that The Princess Bride was her favorite movie. At least, it had been once, a lifetime ago. He was hardly going to tell her that his hand had wavered over the black mask as he contemplated whether it was the right thing to do. Like it always had been with Polly Walsh, he spent more time than he should, wondering if he was doing the right thing. She was his best friend's younger sister, his surrogate grandparents' granddaughter. It had always been difficult to know what to do with Polly. His instinct had always been to protect her, but she wasn't his sister. Besides, she didn't appreciate Brendan's interference in her life, let alone his. His other instinct had been to do something like kiss her, just like he had moments ago on the dance floor. The last time they'd come close to doing that, he'd luckily remembered at the last moment that she was Polly, and kissing her would change everything. "How long are you staying?" She crossed her arms. "Until your grandparents' anniversary party. I can't believe you've come for that," she said, almost a whisper. 75 years. Of course I've come. They're the only grandparents I've ever known. When he and his mother had moved to Diamond Bay, they were on their own. Archie's father had long since skipped out on them. His grandparents were gone. Brendan and Polly spent so many weekends and school holidays with their grandparents that when he and Brendan became best mates, it was natural for Archie to go along as well. Everyone took it as written that the invitation to their grandchildren also extended to Archie. "They were good to Mum and good to me." Polly nodded, but she didn't look any happier. "You're not driving home, are you?" Archie asked. They'd had quite a few drinks. He was walking back to his mother's, but Polly's parents' house was a short drive away. She glared at him. No, and you're not walking by yourself. Quit the big brother routine. He honestly hadn't realized that she hadn't recognized him. I thought you'd figured out who I was. I thought you were just pretending. You knew I didn't know. He held up his hands in surrender. Not at first, and I thought you were messing with me. Me mess with you, you're the messer. She'd said he was her mortal enemy. How could two people's memories of their past be so widely different? Polly hadn't been his nemesis. She'd been, well, there was no real word for their relationship. He'd always thought they were friends. It wasn't an easy friendship at times, it was outright awkward, but he'd always assumed she knew she could trust him. With anything, not after the night of Brendan's 21st, you dope. Being back home was strange, but seeing Polly holding Polly as they danced was strangely overwhelming. Looking at her now with her mask removed, he could properly see her gorgeous face. Her long dark hair framed her face, her brown eyes gleaming with annoyance. Those things hadn't changed over the years. He still saw strong glimpses of the girl who had been her brother's shadow growing up, though her demeanor had changed. She was stronger, more confident. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it. Is it strange being back? He asked, wanting to move on from this awkward place they seemed to have landed. Yes and no. Her shoulders lifted and then dropped heavily. It's the same, but I'm not. He got that. Some things are different, some are the same, she said. Have you been to 5 Mile Beach or the lighthouse? No, have you? No, we could check it out together. Her eyes widened, shocked at his request. But would she say yes? Polly searched the house for a sun hat. Her parents had made some changes to her childhood home over the years, but it still smelt the same. The hats were still on the hooks by the front door, exactly as they had always been. All morning, she'd been trying to forget about the fact that she'd almost kissed Archie on the dance floor. Archie Thompson, her sworn enemy. She also tried to forget the fact that she'd told Archie he was her sworn enemy. With knowledge of his real identity, their whole conversation last night washed back over her in a sickening wave of understanding and mortification. What was she thinking? Going on a date with Archie Thompson? Was it a date? Why wasn't she doing everything in her power to avoid him and his scheming and tricking? Last night was a perfect example of how utterly and completely infuriating he could be. I'd like to kiss you. That was why. Because of the feeling that had hit her in the chest when he'd said those words to her when she didn't know who he was. Because of the way his lips had looked beneath the mask, full and kissable. Because of the way she'd felt in his arms when they danced. So here she was standing in her hallway like she was 17 again and waiting for a date to pick her up. She'd been vague when her mother had asked what she was going to do today. Then she heard his voice. Archie was in the kitchen, talking to her mother. Polly rushed in and saw them hugging her mother, telling him he hadn't changed. And then she smiled at Polly and winked. Great! She'd been trying to keep this date or non-date off her mother's radar and failed spectacularly. I didn't realize you were going to come in through the kitchen, Polly said awkwardly. I always came in through the kitchen. It would have been strange not to. Or did you think I'd knock at the front door like one of your suitors? She wanted to hit him, Archie Thompson. Impossible. Nah. Archie drove his hire car from the Walsh's place along the coastal drive and to one of his favorite beaches. Like Polly had said the night before, Diamond Bay was the same, but he was different. The sky was as blue as ever, the dense bush just as green, but roads that once felt long were now short. Beaches that had seemed short were now endless. Years away had changed his sense of the world. He parked, and they took the short walk over the dunes to 5 Mile Beach. They slipped off their shoes to walk over the deep, lightly packed sand to the firmer ground by the water. It was a Sunday, but it was early spring, so the water was only warm enough for kids who had different thermostats than him. He closed his eyes for a long moment and took it all in. The air, the sounds, the smells. When he opened his eyes, he glanced over at Polly and realized she was doing the same thing. "There's nowhere else in the world quite like this, is there?" he asked. "Nope, nowhere." Then she turned to him and smiled. "Nowhere is this quiet." Archie had lived in Sydney, Singapore, Frankfurt, and London, always trying something new. In his job as a stockbroker, he was always chasing the next deal, looking for the next challenge. Being back in Diamond Bay was unsettling, probably because of the change in pace. Everyone here seemed content with their lives happily coupled up like inhabitants of the Ark. All his life, Archie had shunned commitment, associating it first with the desertion of his father, and then having it reinforced by living somewhere as sleepy and staid as Diamond Bay. He craved change and adventure. They carried their shoes and set off along the beach, weaving in and out of the shallows, getting their ankles wet in the cool, salty water. Polly wore faded blue jeans rolled up at the ankles and a loose white shirt. Her dark hair was piled on her head in a loose bun, giving him tempting views of the soft skin on her long neck and collarbones. "When did you realize it was me last night?" she asked. He grinned, and he knew she was not going to like his answer. "I'm sorry, but pretty much straight away. I assumed you knew who I was, too, when you saw I was dressed as the Dread Pirate Roberts." "Why?" "Because I assumed you knew that I knew it was your favorite movie. Is it still?" "Yes," she admitted with a scowl. "But why would you wear something from my favorite movie?" "The first time I saw it was with you at Maisie and Ken's. A happy memory, I guess." Archie had such warm memories of the weekends with Polly's grandparents. He, Polly, and Brendan would stay almost every Saturday night while their parents had well-earned breaks. It was on these Saturday nights that his mother had met and then dated David, the man she eventually married. Maisie and Ken had given his mother the opportunity and space to find a new partner. Archie had simply been glad to be spending time with his best mate, whose grandparents' house backed onto the bush, whose cupboards were filled with puzzles and board games, and who seemed to have an endless capacity for playing with their grandchildren. Archie's memories of that time were only happy. They reached the end of the beach in what felt like an instant. "Shall we go around the headland?" he asked. She nodded. They sat and put their shoes on again so they could navigate the shale and rock pools. He loved this place, hopping from one outcrop to the next, looking to see what was hidden in each new crevice. "Was it just pushing you into the pool and cheating at board games?" Polly stopped abruptly, and for a moment he thought she might slip. "Was what?" "The reason I'm your nemesis. It could be something else. The night of Brendan's 21st. When they had almost kissed. No, he'd stopped just in time, and for her sake, not his. It had taken every skerrick of his self-control to step away from her that night. "Can I ask you something, and you promise you won't laugh?" she said. "I really can't promise that," he said with a smile. "Never mind then." "What?" "Did you tell Danny Mars not to go out with me?" Archie scratched his head, genuinely trying to remember who she was talking about. "Was he the guy with the bad goatee?" She nodded. He grimaced. "I might have. I was in love with him." The way she proclaimed this, he wasn't sure if she was joking or not. Surely she realized that Danny Mars was an idiot who wouldn't deserve her in a million years. "Really?" "Yes, and he finally asked me out, and then he canceled. and never spoke to me again. Did you really tell him to stay away? Archie honestly couldn't remember. It wasn't something he'd do now, but might have been something 17-year-old Archie would have done. She wasn't Brendan's little sister anymore. She was an independent woman. She didn't need his or her older brother's protection. Not that she had even back then. "What's Danny doing now?" he asked. "That's not the point. You shouldn't have interfered." "I don't remember if I did, honestly. What's he doing now?" "He might have spent some time in jail for selling drugs." Archie resisted the urge to laugh. "You shouldn't have interfered." "If I did, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was your dream to be a drug runner's girl." Polly's fury at Archie began to fade away, and she was almost ready to laugh about it. Danny Mars may have been handsome, he may have had a nice car, but with hindsight, it was probably bought with the proceeds of crime. They were now a distance from Archie's car and had a long walk back. She had no choice but to keep walking with him. But once they got the Danny thing out of the way, it was easier to talk to Archie. They shared the same shorthand and similar history. It wasn't like when she dated men in New York, and there were things they said that she didn't quite understand, and things about her they just didn't get. She and Archie understood one another, and they had plenty to talk about. Not just their childhoods, but about what it was like to be an expat. "Do you think you'll ever come home to live?" she asked. "I love it here, but no, I left for a reason." Polly asked the next question, and it was one she'd been asking herself a lot lately. "Why did you leave?" "Greater opportunities." As though that answer had been obvious, he asked, "Why did you leave?" "The same. You still have lots of family here. I'm happy Mum has David, but I'm a third wheel. This place is fine if you have someone." Polly nodded. Archie's mother and stepfather were another of Diamond Bay's loved-up couples. "Do you think you'll ever come back?" he asked. "I don't think I'll stay in New York forever, but I don't think I'd come back here. I'm hoping to be able to open my own restaurant soon and really..." "Well, I'm torn. I love New York, but it's not the easiest place to establish a new business." She hadn't admitted that ambition aloud to anyone, and could scarcely believe she was doing it now to Archie of all people. "You never settled down with anyone?" he asked her. "No." She'd met plenty of amazing people, but never the exact right person. "No, I've moved around a lot. I always want to know what's across the next ocean. Besides, I think growing up in Diamond Bay ruined me." "I know what you mean. Is everyone here coupled up?" "Yes, even the dogs," she laughed. "I don't see the big deal. I have a full life too full. Not everyone needs to get married." She nodded. The Polly from New York probably would have agreed heartily. But being back in Diamond Bay was messing with her equilibrium. Would her life be happier if she had someone to share it with? Would she be happier back here, close to her family? She and Archie shared stories about their dating history easily and naturally, as though she were talking to one of her old girlfriends. Archie understood both her worlds, her life overseas, and her childhood in Diamond Bay. Both of them had dated as much as their busy schedules allowed, but all those relationships had fizzled out for various reasons. Wanting different things, not wanting to compromise. Clashing of schedules. Infidelity. "I was never willing to compromise, I guess. I don't see the point in committing if it isn't perfect," he said. "And I guess I don't want to be tied down." "I just never met anyone I was prepared to compromise for," she mused suddenly, wondering when she'd set the bar. Archie woke the next morning with a strong sense that something wasn't quite right, but he couldn't place what it was. His mother was busy. She volunteered at the school 3 days a week. Brendan was working. It was a work day for everyone, except Polly. Hoping she too would be at a loose end, he sent her a message asking what she was up to. "Seeing my grandparents," she wrote. Want to come? Polly sat with her grandparents while Archie made the tea and cut the cake he'd bought. At 96 and 95, respectively. Ken and Maisie still lived independently in a small place not far from Polly's parents. They were slow and frail, but still very much coping. His sight was fading faster than hers, so she read the fine print that needed reading and changed the television channels. Her limbs were weaker than his, so he lifted anything heavier than a full teacup for her. Archie loved watching the pair of them look after one another. They listened eagerly to the stories of Archie's and Polly's overseas adventures. "Have you been up to the lighthouse?" Maisie asked. "Apparently the whales are going past." The best view of the biannual whale migration was usually from the lookout point and the lighthouse. The whales would be traveling south for the summer. Archie turned to Polly. "How about it?" She smiled, nodded, and something in his chest lifted and lightened. The Diamond Point Lighthouse guarded the entrance to the bay. It was the symbol of the town on all the postcards and tea towels. It was perched high on the point, and on a clear day you could see hundreds of miles up and down the magnificent coast. "Can you still go up?" she wondered. "Why are you asking me?" Archie laughed. "I'm as much of a tourist these days as you." The door at the base of the lighthouse was open. A guide was taking donations for the building's upkeep, which they both generously gave. Climbing the stairs, Polly didn't feel like a tourist, but a time traveler, remembering back to her childhood and the last time she'd climbed these stairs, which had not changed at all. At the top, panting slightly, they took in the spectacular view. They circumnavigated the top of the lighthouse, looking in vain for whales getting slightly battered by the wind. "I loved coming up here," Archie said. "I used to dream of sailing the high seas." "Like a pirate," he smiled. "Yes, to travel over the ocean to know what was at the other side of this sea." Polly had felt the same way, and now you know. "I do," she wanted to ask. "And what are you thinking now?" He answered her unvoiced question with a smile before he leant down and kissed her. When his lips met hers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Just a quick kiss. No tongue, no open lips, no explanation. It left her reeling. She could hear her heart beating in her ears even above the crash of the waves against the rocks and the wind whipping around them. There were no whales to be spotted that afternoon. The guide told them they would have better luck in the mornings when the ocean would be calmer. But Polly hardly heard her head still spinning from the sensation of Archie's full lips on hers. They walked back down the stairs, pretending as though nothing had happened. Polly holding on to the rail the entire way down, not trusting her shaking knees. Back at the car, Polly thought Archie was about to open her door for her, but their eyes locked. She wasn't having it. Archie was not just going to kiss her briefly and then act like it was nothing. She stepped towards him at the same moment he pulled her into his arms. Their lips opened, and this time their tongues tangled. Unlike the chaste kiss at the top of the lighthouse, this one was full of heat fire and pent-up momentum. His hands slid up her back and into her hair. Hers slid down his and to the back pocket of his jeans. This was what had been missing from her life, she thought, as heat and pressure built up inside her. "I want to do things to you that we can't do here," she whispered into his warm neck. "Are you sure? Aren't you?" She was thrown. She could feel how much he wanted her. He could hardly keep that a secret when she was pressed so firmly to him. "Because if this is some sort of trick, it's not a trick, I promise. I want you too. You have no idea how much—" He said, his voice rough. "Where can we go?" She was breathless, again panting. Archie groaned. "My mother's at home." "Mine too." He held her. They were in their 30s. How could they still be wondering about their parents' movements in order to get some time together? It must be a sign, she thought, pulling away.
Maybe it's just as well,
He said. Maybe it was. Maybe not taking this any further was the sensible, safe thing to do. Definitely. Not taking this any further was the right thing to do. So why did it make her ache?